Hi Curious and welcome back. As you may know, the United Kingdom is in a national mourning over the death of Prince Philip, and condolences are pouring in from around the world for the royal family. The Duke of Edinburgh performed royal duties for nearly 70 years and was there to support Queen Elizabeth II. However, his sharp tongue sometimes caused her a lot of trouble as well. He had a peculiar sense of humour and committed many gaffes. Inappropriate statements became somewhat of a trademark, and his jokes and outrageous statements often made headlines. And although his behaviour sometimes left much to be desired, it was precisely these slip-ups that earned him sympathy and made the monarchy, which was often seen as rigid by ordinary people, seem much closer and more human. By what words did Prince Philip earn the title of Gaff King? Stay with us until the very end to hear about the most famous ones uttered in a humorous tone by the Duke of Edinburgh. But before we continue, don't forget to hit the bell and the subscription button so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. When Prince Philip was hospitalised in mid-February, millions of people around the world were watching the British monarchy even more closely than usual. And while official statements at the time said the prince was feeling fine, many were already wondering what would happen if his life came to an end. After all, it was at his side that the young Elizabeth became queen, and she had to rise to the challenge of measuring up to her role. Decades passed. Privately, they had become parents of 4 children, grandparents and great-grandparents, and the Queen earned the title of the longest reigning British monarch and the longest reigning queen in world history. You can hear about their marriage of nearly 74 years, rumours and various scandals, including those related to the prince's alleged affairs, in our other episode, for which the link is currently being displayed. But still, stay with us, because although their marriage had to endure a lot, Prince Philip, living in the shadow of his wife, was a huge support for her. She, under his influence, reportedly showed a human face. He had already accompanied Elizabeth on official important trips when more responsibilities fell on her during the illness of her father, King George VI. And when she became queen in February 1952, the Duke of Edinburgh performed royal duties by her side for 65 years. During that time, he made as many as 5,500 speeches. He was aware of his representative role and could joke about it. During the opening of a new Arsenal soccer team stadium, he said that Queen Elizabeth II may not have attended the ceremony, but he pointed out that they have the second most experienced plaque unveiler in the world. In contrast, during a visit to Canada in 1969, he said in a ceremonial speech, "I declare this thing open, whatever it is." And yes, the prince was famous for his sense of peculiar humour, which also accompanied him during serious and important meetings, which, by the way, we will tell you more about in a moment. In 2017, Buckingham Palace released a statement that Prince Philip had decided to retire. As a 96-year-old, he withdrew from public life and only attended ceremonies that particularly interested him. The decision was made primarily due to his advanced age, but it was clear that some health issues also played part. For a few more years, the Duke enjoyed his well-being and holed up in his wood farm home on the Sandringham estate. As the Queen remained active all this time, she lived at Buckingham Palace, the official London residence of British monarchs. So they lived apart and didn't see each other for several weeks, but they reportedly spoke to each other on the phone every day. Due to the pandemic, they have had more time for each other over the past year, as they are known to have spent quarantine time together at Windsor Castle. Prince Philip died on April 9th at the said castle, to which he returned on March 16th after spending a month in 2 London hospitals. Following the death of the Queen's husband, an 8-day national mourning period was declared in Britain. Despite his various past sins, the prince enjoyed great respect from his wife. Over the years, however, the Queen has had to deal with sensationalism and even outrage over the prince's crude language. The monarch has rarely spoken publicly about her husband, but there have been times she has. On the official Instagram and Twitter of the royal family were posted her words, which she made in 1997, and here we quote, "He has, quite simply, been my strength and stay all these years, and I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know." Also included is a passage saying, and here we quote once again, "At the Queen's coronation in 1953, the Duke of Edinburgh swore to be Her Majesty's liege man of life and limb." The Duke was a devoted consort, companion to the sovereign, for almost 70 years, from Her Majesty's accession in 1952 until his death. Not surprisingly, Prince Philip's death 2 months before his 100th birthday caused a great stir in the world. However, you can hear about how his passing may affect the royal family and how likely it is that the Queen will hand over the crown to her son Prince Charles in our other episode, the link to which is currently being displayed above. And just as we mentioned, Prince Philip was known for his sharp sense of humour and cutting tongue. However, his jokes were often considered offensive and inappropriate. Philip and Elizabeth were opposites. She was always serious and reserved, while he could run amok in spite of courtly etiquette, to which he made no secret of his dislike. He was also well aware that his expressions did not always match the prince's image. He was the longest living spouse of a monarch in the history of the British Empire, as well as the oldest spouse in the history of the monarchy. Over the years of his public appearances in various more or less official meetings, he made a lot of slip-ups. However, the staff of the royal family never hid that the prince was their favourite royal. There were even legends about his sense of humour at the British court. Many appreciated both his distance to reality and his sense of observation. Reportedly, it is to the husband of the Queen belong the words, and we quote, "When a man opens a car door for his wife, it's either a new car or a new wife." British people adored him and forgave numerous, even rude jokes. And, of course, journalists waited for years for more outrageous statements to be made, which were fodder for the media. Well, there were so many of them that almost 10 years ago, on the occasion of his 90th birthday, The Telegraph even prepared a list of the most famous gaffes of the Duke of Edinburgh. There are many examples of cutting language of Queen Elizabeth's husband, who died a few days ago. However, one of the most frequently quoted is a conversation he had with British students in China in the 1980s, during which he warned them that if they stayed there long enough, they would get slanted eyes. The comment sparked a wave of negative comments in the media that deemed Prince Philip intolerant. His verbal antics, which sometimes brought unpleasantness to the Queen and the palace, did not stop him from saying what he thought. Thus, for example, also in the 1980s, during a WWF meeting, Prince Philip announced, and we quote, "If it has got 4 legs and it is not a chair, if it has got 2 wings and it flies but is not an airplane, and if it swims and it is not a submarine, the Cantonese will eat it." At the time, Buckingham Palace had to convince the Chinese government that Queen Elizabeth's husband's statements were not a criticism of Beijing's policies. In 1961, during an official visit to the Scottish Women Institute, Prince Philip stated that British women could not cook. In turn, in 1965, while visiting an exhibition of primitive art in Ethiopia, he did not fail to voice his opinion, which read, and we quote, "It looks like the kind of thing my daughter would bring back from her school art lessons." A few years later, when asked if he would visit the Soviet Union, he replied without hesitation, not restraining himself one bit, that he would love to visit Russia, despite the fact that they had taken the lives of half of his family. As you can see, the Duke of Edinburgh's cutting tongue manifested itself at different times. And since he could joke about serious topics, it is no surprise that particularly every official visit of his was a reason for another, more or less noticeable statement fueled by his humour. In 1995, for example, he asked a Scottish driving instructor how he managed to keep his fellow countrymen from consuming alcoholic beverages so that they would come to the course sober. In 1999, the press roared when the prince made a joke about deaf children at a charity concert who were standing next to a Caribbean drummers. At one point, the Queen's husband threw in their direction, and we quote here, "Deaf? If you're near there, no wonder you're deaf." But that's not the only text towards the youth. On another occasion, he became famous for his painfully honest statements. He told 13-year-old Andrew Adams, who dreamed of becoming an astronaut, that he should lose weight if he wanted to fulfill his dreams. While in the 1990s, Cayman Islanders were asked by the prince if most of them were not descendants of pirates. During his official visit to Australia in 2002, the prince asked the natives if they still threw spears at each other. As you can guess, these were the words about which all the newspapers wrote, and even the most famous political commentators in the world discussed it. A year later, the official visit of Queen Elizabeth II and her husband to Nigeria brought another, among the most famous gaffes of the prince. At the time, he commented on the traditional dress of the then president of the country, saying, and we quote, "You look like you're ready for bed." The Duke of Edinburgh also had quite a few specific answers. When after the massacre that occurred in the Scottish town of Dunblane, he was asked about outlawing guns, he replied, and we quote, "If a cricketer, for instance, suddenly decided to go into a school and batter a lot of people to death with a cricket bat, which he could do very easily, I mean, are you going to ban cricket bats?" Despite his many biting remarks and jokes, all of which we won't be able to quote in one episode, supporters of the British royal family have always felt that it was Prince Philip who knew best how to amuse a rather stiff company. Because of the gaffes he committed and his looser demeanour, the other members of the royal family, he was always considered to have the most human face. Apart from being controversial, his presence and humor also made many smile, including during those many public meetings. For example, in 2013, he said to a Nobel laureate fighting for the right of women in Afghanistan to education that children go to school because parents don't want them at home, to which the young woman giggled heartily. So curious, did you know that Queen Elizabeth's husband had such a specific sense of humor? Did you realize that he committed so many gaffes in public? Which of the listed examples do you find funny, and which do you find inappropriate? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.